big bang of AI started with the discovery of deep learning neural networks, with the first application of it being image classification. This was done at the University of Toronto. Alex Krizhevsky, Ilya Sutskever, and Jeff Hinton, who's considered the godfather of AI, their professor. Essentially, they solved a long-standing computer science problem that had vexed computer scientists for many decades. We've been trying to solve image classification since the 1950s. And they solved it by developing or writing the software in a completely new way. In the past, the way we would develop the most advanced algorithms is by just having a brilliant computer scientist imagine it. They would transcribe it into code, figure out what the rules were for the algorithm, and with a small computer, a laptop, you could develop all the software you needed. What was novel here was that we solved this problem by essentially, instead of telling the computer what the algorithm is, we showed the computer examples of what we would like it to do. We gave it millions and millions of images with labels, images of cats, and said, this is a cat, this is a dog, this is an airplane, this is a tractor, and so on. And doing that enough times with enough compute, it wrote the software. It created a neural network that solved this problem that to this day a human can't do directly. So what we took from that was now we potentially have this tool, this way of creating algorithms, creating software that we had no line of sight to being able to develop before. And we started asking ourselves, what is the best application of this? How are we going to create the most value? And so 10 years ago, we hypothesized that if we could solve image classification, which is a subset of this class of problems called computer vision, allowing computers to see, which is in itself a subset of problems, or a subset of a domain of essentially physical AI, robotics, understanding the physical world and operating inside the physical world, said maybe now we finally have the capabilities, or we will soon, to bridge this divide between the digital world and the physical world, and apply computing and all of the innovation and development we have on the computing side, which is exponential, to the physical world. If you look at this from a markets perspective, the global market for information technology, for computing, is about $5 trillion, which is very large, but it pales in comparison to all the other, to everything else, which is about the physical world. We have $100 trillion in markets that are behind transportation, healthcare, drug discovery, materials, supply chain and logistics, on and on. All these other physical industries that have been largely untouched by the advances in computing. If you go into any random factory from the millions of factories around the world, chances are they're really no different than how they were 20 years ago or even 50 years ago. Somebody from 50 years ago would know what to do in a modern factory today because they're not that different. That's very different than knowledge work. Work in industries that are largely about information and knowledge are completely different today because computing has changed that. So in the past 10 years, we've progressed in AI. It started with AlexNet, which ushered in the first era, which was about perception AI. These were AIs that were very specific. You had to train them to do one specific task, and largely they were around perceiving things, whether it was image classification and computer vision, audio recognition, and so on. With a few years into that, we had the invention of the transformer model, which ushered in the age of generative AI. This is where large language models came in and then eventually became mainstream with the introduction of ChatGPT. Finally, everybody got to touch it. The great innovation here was instead of having a specific intelligence that can only do one thing, we took the enormity of the information about language available to us on the internet and put all of that data, all of that language through a supercomputer, and what came out of it was a model that had extracted the patterns of language, patterns of understanding. And you can use this not just to do one specific task, but for many, many different things. You could use it to generate new language. You could use it to take large amounts of language and summarize it and condense it for you. You can use it to transfer style. You can give it a Shakespeare poem and tell it to turn it into a rap song. And it could do all of these things because it understood the fundamental rules or laws of language in its generality. The era we just entered and started, the one we had theorized about a long time ago, is the era of agents, agentic AI. This is where we take the capabilities, the intelligence that the previous era, generative AI, gives us, and we put it in a harness. We put it in a system that allows this AI to perceive its environment and get context. It allows it to use tools and to also call other agents or create other agents to instruct it to do things. Essentially, we are giving the generative AI, the brain, an embodiment inside the digital world so that it can go act. It can go gather information just like a knowledge worker would by using a computer and all tools on the computer, and go take actions inside that world. The first major domain that we've applied this to is coding. That's not a coincidence. I mean, it's coders that are creating this to begin with, so it's the most useful thing for them. But also, if you can create code, you can use that same fundamental capability to plan and execute other things. Everything in life is kind of an algorithm of sorts, right? The era that's coming, this is a long-winded way to get to what we're talking about, physical AI, is essentially robotics, the application of AI to the physical world is simply us taking what we're building right now in the digital agentic AI era, these agents, and giving them a physical body. They're fundamentally doing the same things that they're doing in the digital world, but doing it out here in the physical world. Instead of just retrieving information from the internet and from our databases, they retrieve information from the physical world through sensors, through cameras and LiDARs and microphones and whatever sensors we equip them with. They make decisions based on what they understand the world to be, on predictions, what will happen if they act within that world. And then they can actuate. They can drive a motor, they can rotate wheels, put the brakes on, etc. Essentially, autonomous vehicles are a form of this kind of robot, but essentially any robotic system we can think of that follows this pattern of perceiving, reasoning and planning, and then acting in a loop is a robot to us. So autonomous vehicles are a robot. You have AMRs inside factories, which are essentially small autonomous vehicles. Manipulator arms that can see, that have cameras and other sensors and can react to their environment intelligently. Humanoids, but even things that you wouldn't normally consider a robot are a robotic system if they follow this pattern. This building can be a robot if you equip it with sensors and you put an AI that is using the information from those sensors to make decisions. It can potentially make decisions and actuate by changing the climate in this room, depending on the number of people in here and what the weather is like, or giving access physically to different parts of the building by locking and unlocking doors, or even coordinating other robots within that environment. This is what we're doing inside our factories and warehouses and potentially even in spaces where there's many humans interacting, like hospitals and so on. And so it's very exciting. These are exciting times. We are now entering the agentic era. Physical AI is right around the corner. The great thing about these technology eras, when they come in, they're disruptive, but they're also essentially a fundamental reset for everyone. It's a great equalizer. Because it's so new, every country, every researcher, every university is kind of starting at zero with each one of these resets. And in some cases, those that were ahead in the previous era are at somewhat of a disadvantage because as incumbents, they have inertia in a certain direction. The other interesting thing about this era is that it's not sufficient to just be expert in computing and in software, the digital part of the technology spectrum. Expertise and skills and know-how in the physical world in your particular domain are critical for the application of these technologies. And the UK actually has a lot of advantages in this area. The industrial revolutions started here. And there's a long history of manufacturing and doing things in the physical world. What I've been learning is the NHS is a great asset and advantage here. Applications of physical AI into healthcare is going to be extremely valuable. Obviously, there's many use cases that will be transformative for healthcare in the world. And the fact that you have a national healthcare system that is the largest, such a large employer, and so much data is available, and the government can reduce friction to deploy these physical AI systems into the healthcare system gives the UK an advantage. It can lead the world in this area. So with that, I'll pass it on to Mary.
Well, you've said almost everything, so I'll be right short. I think one of the reasons that NVIDIA is talking to Imperial about this is kind of the way that Imperial thinks about some of these challenges or these future technology development areas. I think if you think about intelligence as we all understand it as biological systems, we are physically intelligent. Right? Our intelligence, our brain, the intelligence emerges from that because of the engagement of our physical entities with the environment. And so one of the things that we've been working on at Imperial through an initiative we call the Convergence Science is to try to develop what we call a unified theory of intelligence. How we are coupling what happens in biology and what happens in artificial intelligence, as exemplified by, if you like, the robot brain. And that's it's a really important and interesting scientific challenge. But just as important, it's a really critical technological and deployment challenge for industry. And I think, as Rev indicated, The great thing about disruptive innovation is that it restarts the race for technology leadership. So we are in one of these moments of reset, I think, with physical AI. There's not an obvious leader globally. There are some very strong candidates, right? And if you think about conventional robotics, I would say the UK is behind. If you think about AI, industrially, the UK is behind. But in the physical AI space, there is, I think, a moment in time where we can actually demonstrate that we can bring together the research expertise, the skills base, the manufacturing base, the government will and co-investment, and the regulatory framework that goes with some very specific use cases that actually can be brought together to kind of reset leadership for an industry perspective. But also to look at some of the things that the UK has struggled with in terms of productivity. Right? How can deployment of physical AI help in the productivity space in many of these industrial areas that we care about and would like to see growth in? From the Imperial perspective, we've worked with NVIDIA for a long time, and so this was the kind of the natural next step. So we're very grateful that you're here today, Reverend, and the team. We're a STEM B organisation, right? So science, technology, engineering, medicine, business. Within that framework, we really have a focus on innovation. So I like to say my job is creating the best environment where our researchers do the best, most excellent discovery work, but then saying, okay, so what? How do we pull that through and drive impact from that? So what does the ecosystem need to look like to deliver that? What's the environment? What are the assets? What are the tools that I can make sure that we have? Part of that is the research base, and we're number one in the UK, number one in Europe for research and research impact. But also a deliberately curated set of innovation assets. So if you go to our White City campus, we've taken inspiration from innovation ecosystem districts around the world that have been, again, emergent. If you go to Kendall Square or you go to California, those ecosystems take a long time to emerge. And we've kind of gone, okay, what's the recipe? What do we put together to build something like that? And we've been doing that here in White City very successfully. I think the other piece that is also really important is our ability to convene wider stakeholders. And one thing we did this morning, we had representatives from government, we had the Regulatory Innovation Office, investors, but also who are the key industry primes, who will be potentially large deployers of this technology, who can help think about, these are some very sector-specific challenges or bottlenecks opportunities. We can also come into this piece and work together with Imperial and NVIDIA on both setting the challenges, helping us unlock the potential, but then helping about the deployment and the scaling, right? So it's not just about creating what we think the next technology will look like and how it will work and how it might be regulated and tested, but also here's a deployment pathway and a key first demonstrator of delivering that. So it's sort of like, I think it was described as a merger of our two ecosystems to bring together actually to try to create this new industry. Maybe I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that was your very passionate. That's great. I wanted to open it up for questions from this group. If anybody has anything I know there will be some.
Yeah. Can I ask you a couple of questions? Perhaps begin on NVIDIA side. There's so much we could talk about, obviously, and there's lots we'll come to, but trying to get down to specifics. As opposed to looking to the future, right now, where is NVIDIA getting the most traction for physical AI? You know, I imagine it's with the cars, but would you say one particular area right now you're getting best traction for physical AI?
Well, definitely with autonomous vehicles. That's the one we've been working on the longest. When we first discovered AI and the potential of AI, and thought about its application in the physical world, we thought, what's the first robot that is likely going to be deployed? There's already some momentum in the AV space, so we started investing in that over a decade ago. People don't quite know this, but we are actually a leader in the autonomous vehicle space. We're the largest autonomous vehicle company in the world that doesn't make autonomous vehicles. We're the largest robotics company in the world that doesn't make robotics. We don't make any. We just work with every other company.
So you're vendor neutral, aren't you? So how would you describe the level you work at with those vendors to get to that position?
And it's essentially the same recipe we have in every industry that we're in. NVIDIA is unique in that from all of the large tech companies, we're the only pure technology company. In that our product, the thing we sell, is purely technology. We don't create solutions and applications. Other tech companies, they're more vertically integrated. They have other products they sell. They might sell advertisement. They sell their business model is about selling something else in which the technology is an important component of their product. But our product is just the technology, which means by itself it's actually kind of useless. Technology doesn't do anything. It's not anything useful. Somebody has to actually take that technology and integrate it into a solution or an application that is useful. And so from the very beginning of NVIDIA, I mean, the first industry that we entered or created was the PC gaming industry. But we don't make video games. We don't even make the computers that our computing, our chips are inside. So we form ecosystems and we go to market through them. We foster ecosystems of developers that create the software and the applications that create demand for the compute that gets pulled through our other ecosystem on the supply side. And so we do this in every single industry that we enter. Autonomous vehicles is one of those, and robotics in general is the same. We create these ecosystems as wherever we go.
No, thank you very much.
Would that be?
Okay.
Get me to move on, sorry.
Yeah, but I was going to say that's what makes NVIDIA such a perfect partner to deliver this, right? Because it is one, bringing your ecosystems together, but having that fundamental openness, right, that allows everyone else to crowd in and make it.
Can I just ask a couple of UK questions? You mentioned, you talked about the NHS and the challenges the NHS faces and the scale of it being a good kind of deployment area for a lot of these technologies. What does that actually look like, and how can practical AI help address those challenges?
Well, just yesterday I visited Gosh, because that's what you guys call it.
Yeah,
You call it Gosh. It was very, very impressive. I met with Appian over there, which is I guess in a week or two they're going to deploy drones that deliver lab samples from where they extracted from the patients in these special areas that are very secured because there's infectious diseases and whatnot, directly to the lab via aerial drones, aerial robotics, and back, reducing the amount of time it takes and the latency from when they collect the sample till they get the result, and also freeing humans from having to go do that, so that the humans can spend more time with their patients instead of running these kinds of tasks that are potentially also dangerous because they're handling infectious material. They're also deploying quadruped robots to move around Gosh, which is parts of it are very old buildings like this one, and so navigating with a wheeled modern robot is not even possible in the areas I was looking at. So the goal here is to make the system more efficient and productive, and allow the humans who are part of this to do what they do best and what they want to do, which is to interact with other humans and give humans good care and love and attention, as opposed to doing rote tasks that are not fulfilling.
And I think if you look, I mean, we were talking this morning about the number of vacancies currently in the NHS, 100,000. So the kind of the gap in critical workers to be in the NHS. So how do we free up some of that space by taking away some of the functions that don't necessarily need the human to deliver? So partly there is that aspect, but I think we're talking about the humans being free to take care.
And that's growing, right?
That's
So
growing.
the gap
The gap
is
is
because of
growing.
demographics.
There's an efficiency win in terms of just the sheer cost of running the NHS. So how do we take some of that cost out by deploying some of these technologies? And then also improving patient outcomes, because we can do some of these things faster, more effectively, more reproducibly. So it's on multiple levels.
Can I ask one?
Well, maybe come back to you. Yeah.
Very good.
I know, we're quick on time, I appreciate it.
So it's a question of two parts. So the first is...
I know.
From the Imperial point of view, what has marked the success out of the robotics spin-outs, and what are the bottlenecks getting those solutions into industry, or just more generally these new generations of physical AI into industry?
Yeah. Well, there's quite a long answer to that. So I mean, from our perspective, I'll try to be quick. In the UK in particular, there's a scale-up and deployment challenge, both from investment at scale, right, to create a company that will be kind of a long-term venture-built entity. I think this is probably a global question about regulation and how we think about regulating in that space. I think end-user procurement as a way to signal for investors, and I think the UK government could do a better job of thinking about how it uses government procurement to support some of that. But there's a wealth of opportunities and spin-outs that are starting this journey, and increasingly are starting to look to the physical AI space in particular. So rather than, we're seeing quite a few niche, developments that aren't necessarily what we call the frontier of physical AI, right? And so I think what we're trying to do here is say, as we get to this frontier, and we will see even more, how do we make sure that we're ready? What is the framework that lets us be ready for that? And it means all of those things: the talent pipeline, the right people who can think about the systems, the right investment opportunity space that's supported by government, but crowds in, private, the right regulatory framework, and the pull, the procurement pull.
Yes.
NVIDIA is really good in simulation, and all the time we have the gap between simulation and real world. And to become the application running faster in the industry, we should close this gap. When did you expect to close this gap?
So there's multiple answers to the question about the sim to real gap.
Yeah.
We do simulation for various purposes in computer. When we're designing a product, designing a wing for an airplane, you want to do simulation, and you want to have as small a sim to real gap as possible to know that wing is flight worthy before you put it out there. But that's actually different than a lot of the simulation we need to do to create the physical intelligence for a robot brain. I mean, if you think about it from a human or creature intelligence point of view, we do simulations in our mind all the time. We predict what's going to happen when you're watching somebody interact with an object. You know how to catch a ball when it's thrown by, because you're predicting the ballistics of that object flying in space, and can catch it at just the right moment in time. But you're not doing an exact simulation there. You just have enough understanding of how the physics works and can adapt even when the parameters change. You can take a human that has lived its whole life on Earth, with gravity being negative 9.8 meters squared per squared second, and then put them on the moon. And at first, they won't be able to walk properly, but eventually they'll figure it out. And so the AIs that we're building to understand the physical world They need to have something equivalent to how humans and creatures understand the world, and actually be adaptable to changing parameters. So the simulations that we build to do that kind of training doesn't have to match the world exactly. Actually, we can make more robust physical intelligence, more robust robot brains by having them trained in simulations that have a bunch of different versions of what reality might be like. You can vary gravity, vary friction, so that it could be adaptable. When I go to pick up this glass, I don't know the exact weight of this, what the center of gravity is, what the friction coefficients are, but I can guess based on my previous experience what it's like. And sometimes I'm surprised, maybe there's some condensation on the glass, but I adapt to it. So matching the sim to real gap is not exactly for many of our purposes that critical. But there are cases where we still need to do that, and what you can do is essentially do most of your training inside simulation, do most of it there, but then you do the final amount, the post-training, out in the real world. You can.
That was the sense of the question, not to make the real to sim gap to zero, but to have the opportunity to adapt it.
Yes.
And therefore we need a lot of AI, also physical, and that is a question. When did you expect to bring the robot from the simulation in different production areas?
We've been doing it for years for various tasks. I just visited Humanoid yesterday, and they went from simulation, training in simulation, to having the robot walk in less than a week.
Okay.
Zero shot, like straight. And this is actually pretty common. We've been doing that for years now. Getting robots to be able to walk, quadrupeds and bipeds, completely trained in simulation, they can come out. 5 years ago, that was like a miracle. Like getting a bipedal robot to walk. Now we take it for granted. So it's developing very quickly, and we already have. I'm sure you've seen the Chinese robots like Unitree, all doing kung fu and whatnot. This is all trained, and the brain that is doing that control was completely built inside simulation first, and using our technologies.
Do you have a question, Sam?
Sure.
One last one. Sorry.
Why do we think humanoid as a form factor is so appealing? Why not? So I'm aware, we have warehouse robots, we have industrial arms, we have other kinds of robotics. Humanoid, why not something more task specific that would be a lot easier, right?
Yeah, there's multiple reasons why, but if you look at it from an economics perspective, there's always this tension between making devices that are specialized, that are perfect for a particular task, but then end up becoming kind of niche, versus a general device that can do more things.
Yeah.
Computers are like that. There's been all kinds of computing devices, from specialized calculators, MP3 audio players, video viewing devices. We've had all kinds of various devices, but we've kind of ended up converging on just this as the ultimate device, or our laptop. There's not actually that many form factors we ended up with computers. Even though if you look at computing history, we've had many, many kinds of specialized computers. And the reason behind that is the fundamental economics. To build something like this and to scale it up, you need a supply chain and an industry that's putting massive capex and capital investments into it. It's hard to do that when the product that you're building is specialized and the market is small. You need to create something that is general enough that it can justify the large investment, because the market is large, because the general device that you're building is fungible across many different uses. So if you start from there, you go, well, what is the most general form factor we can choose for a robot? If we're going to invest $1 trillion across tens of thousands of companies and dozens of countries around the world, all to build a supply chain, what is the form factor that we can bet on that will have the most applications, even if it's not perfect at every single one? So in case one application doesn't quite work out or be large enough that you can apply it elsewhere, well, it's probably a humanoid form factor, because we built this world around humans. We know that if you can create a robot that has the same capabilities as a human and can fit in the same spaces as a human, can reach the same things as a human, and can manipulate the same kinds of objects, we have a lot of useful things for that robot to do. Now, if we solve that problem as well, the humanoid problem, that's kind of a superset of most of the problems we have in robotics. You solve